something outside my window. It was the middle of summer. I was in my early 20s, asleep in my room. I remember feeling like it was morning. I opened my eyes, and I saw the morning sunlight streaming through my window. It truly felt completely like 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I laid there with my head on the pillow, turned sideways, looking at the streams of yellow morning sunlight filling my room. The only thing that seemed a little off was the brightness of it all. It almost felt too bright. I gently curled my head downward and looked towards the large window that faced the east in my room. I was surprised to see what I thought at first was the sun sitting outside my window. I couldn't see anything but this incredible wall of yellow light just beyond the other side of the glass. I began to sit up to have a better look, but as soon as I moved, I felt this heavy, thick energy clouding my mind, making me feel lightheaded, not really fully conscious, and equally pushing on my upper body, like it wanted me to go back to sleep. When I got a better look at this object, through the glass I could see a sphere of solid gold, or what appeared to be solid gold, about 6 feet in diameter, just outside the window. And behind it was as though it was radiating this beautiful field of illuminated energy, with every color imaginable swirling behind it, to the point where I could not see nothing other than that. I struggled to hold myself up with my left arm, but it felt incredibly weak. All I kept feeling was this pressure around me to go back to bed, like something was telling every cell in my body to return to sleep. I remember turning my head around to see what time it was. The clock beside my bed said 3:20 a.m. The last thing I remember was thinking, what is the sun doing up at 3 o'clock in the morning? At that moment, my arm collapsed. I fell back into bed and immediately went back to sleep. I have no idea what happened in my room that night, but I know something other than the sun was there. The stranger on the road. It was springtime. I was 15 years old. With my brother and our buddy, we were on our pedal bikes on a Saturday morning biking along. It was sunny and warm. We were making our way back home along this dirt road. It was just us, and we were all alone, talking and biking along, when we noticed this young guy walking towards us on the road. He was about 50 yards ahead. We didn't think much about it. He was a young man with blonde hair, glasses, a plaid work jacket, wearing jeans and work boots. He was walking in our direction when he suddenly stopped, looked up at us, and with a panicked look on his face, he turned and jumped into the ditch and ran into the bushes. Now, when he jumped into the bushes, I saw his foot sink into the mud of the ditch as he clambered up the short bank and frantically ran into the tall, tree-like bushes that were parallel with the dirt road. When we saw this, we stopped because that seemed a little too weird to not notice. We then biked up to where he had entered the woods, but to our surprise, there wasn't a single leaf moving on a bush. And even stranger, there was not a single footprint in the mud. And all the woods was silent, as if nothing had happened at all. Now that kind of spooked us. We thought the best thing to do would be just get out of there. And that's exactly what we did. We left. We thought it was strange, but didn't speak of it till a year later. My brother and I were at our older brother's house one night talking about strange events that has happened in life. And so we decided to tell him about this strange young man that we encountered a year earlier. To our surprise, his face looked shocked, and he went silent. Then he told us, "Boys, have I got a story to tell you?" He said that before either of us were born, there was a young man in our town who owned a very fast car. He came in our road one night at a very high speed. Our older brother was working on his own car in the yard of our home that night, listening to a police band radio and hearing what was going on in our town. He could hear this car coming in the road from a long ways away. He knew it was going very fast. He walked out to the end of the driveway to watch this young man fly by in his car. Our brother watched him fly up the road and slide sideways going around a turn as he went out of sight. Our brother went back to working on his car until about an hour later, he heard on the police band radio that they needed a coroner to come to a fatal automobile accident about a mile further in our road. Our brother told our father, and the two of them took a drive up the road to see what had happened. And when they came around a turn, there, in the middle of the road, just behind a police car, was this young man. It was the same car my brother had seen speeding in the road an hour earlier. But now the young man was laying with his head on the seat of his car in the middle of the road, with the driver's door open and his body stretched out on the ground, and his head turned on the seat to its side, just as if he was sleeping. He lost control of his car on a turn, and it flipped over, throwing his head out the window, and as the car rolled over, it came down on top of his head, crushing his head and killing him. He was on his way home from work. He was wearing his jeans, work boots, his work jacket, and he was a blond young man who wore glasses. And it happened on the same stretch of road where we had seen the exact same looking person many years later. When I heard him tell this story, it made my own experience with that stranger on the road that much more creepier. I don't know if that was the same man, but it sure sounded like it was. woman on the street. I'm not one for believing in things that can't be explained. But I saw something one night that made me wonder if what I saw was even real. I was working night shift in a building, and as I was making my rounds at 4 a.m. in the morning, I walked past this window, and I looked out and I saw this woman walking down the street. Below me, it was fall, and there were leaves all over the ground. I stopped to watch her. To this day, I really don't know what possessed me to watch her. She was alone on the street, and there wasn't anyone else around. She walked alone casually down the sidewalk, and all of a sudden, she just stopped in the middle of this large mass of fallen leaves. She took her hands and put them in the air and started making a swirling motion with them. To my utter astonishment, the leaves at her feet all began rising from the ground and began swirling around her like a small tornado. This went on for about 30 seconds, maybe to a minute. You couldn't see her in this wild vortex of leaves. Nothing else on the street was moving, other than these leaves at her feet around her. She continued to swirl her hands, and the leaves seemed to obey her. Then, as quick as it started, she dropped her hands, and all the leaves fell to the ground. And she simply walked away and continued walking down the street. I really don't have any idea what I saw that night. I've tried to rationalize it, like maybe it was just somehow the wind. But I remember looking at the other leaves in the middle of the street, away from her, and they were all just laying there, not moving at all. I've never seen anything like that since. Personally, I don't think I ever want to again.